I am a sucker for like a long, like tempo or threshold interval,
Okay.
like repeated. I love like a 40 minuter, like 3 by 40 minutes, like under overs. So
Oh,
like,
I don't know. That's a first that we've had 40 minuters in the favourite session bucket.
yeah,
This episode is brought to you by Soul Nutrition. They're supporting Georgie. They're supporting most of the best riders in Melbourne and Australia now, actually. They just supported Mark O'Brien to a new record at Peaks Challenge last weekend. So, big shout out to them for supporting this episode. Make sure you stick around until the middle of the episode and you get yourself a discount code so you can get your hands on their new product. Cheers. Okay, very special day for the podcast today. I am joined by a rider who feels like it's a bit of a Mandela effect, feels like she's been in the sport for a couple of decades now, but I just did a little bit of research before the podcast and found out that when I saw her dominating the scene in Australia, it was only 2022, which is about 3 years ago to the day that she was flying around winning just about everything in Australia. Tour of Gippsland, my home race, she came down here and dominated. Then soon after was right up there in the women's Melbourne to Warrnambool. Went over to Europe. What most riders find really difficult in Belgium, she found super easy. Just went over there and rode in the bunch straight away, or not in the bunch too much because she was riding off the front of the bunch a lot of the time. Now did a world tour contract and has spent the last 2 years at the world tour, and now we have just run into each other back in Melbourne and decided it was time to jump on the podcast and chat how things are going and where things are going for her at the moment. Georgie Howe, welcome to Train Like a Monk.
oh, thanks, Si. And I'm really sorry to take the home race away from the Monk family.
Yeah, yep. Well, Tour of Gippsland is probably the best race on the calendar. Not that it's on the calendar at the moment, but you did seem to do very well there when you did it. I
Mm.
guess I'll go straight to what I would usually ask people first up. What are you training for now?
So I'm back here in Australia. Don't actually know where I'm going to be geographically, but I do know what my goals are going to be, like biologically, physiologically. So, training to just be as strong as possible on the bike. Had some health concerns past 12 months, so now that I'm on top of those, on the other end of it, I can really focus on getting really bloody strong. Looking to get my FTP up around 350, and put some guys to the sword on the hell ride and just show that yeah, does you don't have to look like a cyclist to ride as fast as a cyclist.
Yeah, that's it's a good way of looking at it. I think I've even noticed, especially being at the top level in the last few years,
Mm.
it's such an old school way of thinking. In that I'd still show up to races and would get sports directors deciding how quick I was going to go, well, how well I was going for the race based on how much they could see my cheekbones, which is pretty insane in this day and age. But yeah, it is still crazy that so much of cycling, what you would decide how well someone's going or how well they look like they're going to go is based on how they look.
Oh yeah, the classic like oh, you look so fit, where in actuality you're just lean,
Yeah,
or you're just smaller. You
yeah,
just
yeah,
lost weight.
yeah, exactly. No, it's an interesting one. So it's cool to see your goal of, yeah, I guess a really a smart goal in terms of if you're looking at the acronym side of things, but getting your FTP to 350 watts. Is there a time frame for it?
No. Although my like I obviously I want to get back to fitness as quickly as possible, like high fitness, but ideally over the next 6 months. Currently, I'm not employed into like a proper job, so I have the flexibility to train well and like prioritize that outside of other things. So I'm taking this opportunity as like a dip in my corporate career to kind of use it as a surge in my athletic ability.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one because you, I guess, were if we take it back to even before the cycling. So I know you. Uh, People might have even forgotten now because it seems like that long ago, but you were doing something before you were riding a bike and you're doing it pretty well by the sounds of things, or from what I've heard, because I know nothing of that world. So, what were you doing before you were riding a bike?
I was doing the silly sport of going backwards in a rowing boat. So yeah, I started that when I was about 14 years old, 13 years old.
Yep. And
Yeah.
I just see so many people now. I guess it's always been the case, but now it seems a lot more common switching from rowing to cycling. And
Mm.
being successful at it almost straight away, which is really frustrating for people like me who've been cycling since they were 9 and just struggling so much to get there. And then you just see a rower come in like yourself, and within a year they've got a pro contract. So it's clearly a
Yeah.
big crossover there. I guess
Mm.
yeah, to touch on that for the rowers out there listening, and I'm sure there'll be a few
Mm.
once you promote this episode and you've still got a few friends in the rowing community. What would
Do.
be the biggest similarity in the training, and then the biggest difference between rowing training and riding training?
That's a really good question. I've talked about this quite a bit with my now coach, Nick Owen, because he was in the Victorian Institute of Sport when I was a rower at the Victorian Institute of Sport. He was coaching the track team, and he was quite good friends with my sports scientists in the rowing world. And so they'd always be like sledging each other on their like programming and such. But in rowing, it was, I'd say like, I mean, you could say every rower will say we're chronically overtrained. So it's, I'd say contact hours,
They'd
probably
say
30.
rower. Wait, would they say rowers are chronically overtrained or
Rowers are
cyclists?
chronically overtrained.
Interesting. What kind of hours are you looking at per week then?
I'd say contact hours from like, like driving to the sheds, getting the boat on, stretching, pre-chat, everything, like probably 35 hours a week.
Yeah, okay.
And then actual training, probably 25.
Yeah, interesting. So a lot of hours, and then how long's the event? What was your event in rowing?
My event was the women's 8, which is the biggest boat, the fastest boat. So if you're doing that well, it's around 6 minutes.
Yeah, so 25 hours a week for a 6-minute event. And how often were you racing?
Probably about 5% of the year was spent racing.
Yeah. So the trade-off's pretty massive compared to,
Mm.
I guess, your cycling career. So, but in saying that, there's a lot of similarities. A lot of cyclists are chronically overtrained as well.
I mean, yeah, I think the biggest thing, I was talking about this to a mate last week. I think the biggest difference between like, yes, both train a lot. A lot of cyclists are chronically overtrained. But I think with cycling, it's like it's your program.
Yeah.
Whereas with rowing, it's like you're one of 8 in a boat
Okay.
or like one of 60 in a program. And so everyone's doing the same sessions. There's very little wiggle room for individualized adaptations unless you're like injured or whatever.
Yeah.
But it was quite a novel thing for me to come into the cycling world and be like, oh, this is my program.
Yeah. Interesting. And
Yeah.
then, so I guess, is that the biggest similarity and biggest difference together, or would there be something
Um,
else?
I think being boxed all the time is probably another similarity.
Yeah.
I would, I mean, like I think cycling though is we're a bit smarter around things like we've got a lot more tech around HR, like heart rate variability, recovery. Like we're very like it's more of a lifestyle
Hmm.
piece. Whereas in rowing, it was like to feel boxed was good.
Yeah.
So like we'd people rock up to the sheds and be like, my HRV was so low this morning. What was yours? Oh, mine's lower than yours. So I'm more boxed than you. But then they'd still go out and row 30 Ks.
That might just be like a recency thing, because I think in cycling, especially years ago, that was like the thing. If we didn't have
Mm.
HRV, but it was to try and get your TSB as low as possible. Training stress
Yeah,
balance, this
right.
is in training peaks. So if you can get your CTL, yeah, if you were up in the 160s, 170s, brag to everyone about that at the end of a training camp. If your TSB is at like -70, -80, then you can say, yeah, look how cooked I am. This is so cool. Whereas I think you're right, it has changed a bit in cycling now to the
Mm.
point where people are actually realizing, okay, it's not that impressive being that cooked if I'm going out and riding like absolute ass in a race.
Oh, exactly. But then, like, I think cycling is different in the sense that, like, we then move into the season and you get a lot of your intensity through the racing.
Yep.
So then races all of a sudden get intertwined in your training schedule, and you've got to balance that. But it's at a variable that you can't control.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess if we use that to segue, I guess, into your own cycling over the past year. So you've had some health issues. We've got actually a study that you've co-authored that touches on them a bit, and we'll get into that. But just give us a quick background. I'm sure I don't know if you get sick of talking about it at this point, or whether the story hasn't been told in that much depth. But yeah, you came into the scene absolutely flying like by yourself in Belgium, got to the level where yeah you were racing against world tour riders off effectively no training and off a big disadvantage in terms of the support that you were getting given, and then you actually made it to that world tour team, were getting given what from the outside looks like more and more support, yet things didn't actually go the way you would have liked, and you spent most of last year sick and unable to get the most from yourself.
Yeah, I think Yeah, it was a real like ascension into the world tour, and I was like my first year, 2023, like arguably his first year in the world tour, I thought was quite good. So like results wise was doing well. Went to the tour, did that study, went to Worlds in the TT. But then yeah, last year just yeah, I think I was 30 at the time, turning 31, still 30, 31 next week. But I think maybe, yeah, my body probably just caught up with the rapidity of like everything that was going on. So you can only like fall it for so long, but at the same time, like, like there are measures that may have been able to be, like, had I known earlier, could have been put in place to mitigate some of that.
Yeah. So uh, it's a tricky one because obviously it's not. You're probably one of the first athletes to speak more openly about it, and I think it's
Mm.
something that we see a lot of athletes have suffered with in the past. I think there's aspects of your story that almost every pro cyclist has gone through, and I think the fact that you're speaking more openly about it to hopefully prevent other cyclists going through it. Almost all of the cyclists I've had on my podcast have gone through similar, which is crazy that so many people continually make this same mistake. And we'll get
Yeah.
into soon working with today's actually sponsor of the podcast to try and stop people doing that. But you are basically, and I don't know if you want to keep this title or whether it's the worst title in the world, but what I have basically seen over the last 6 months is you've become the pin-up girl for Reds, which
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, red isn't really my color, but I'll take it.
yeah,
But for those who are the uninitiated, reds is not a color. It is stands for relative energy deficiency in sport, and I don't think there's a voice in the cycling world that has really spoken out about it as quite as openly as I have before. I mean, I've got friends in the triathlon world. Emma Jeffcoat is a great example, who actually just got second at her World Cup on the weekend. But she had 5 years in a state of reds, and then that came out of that in 2019, and then it's taken that long for her to get back on the podium. But she's also a huge proponent of it, and it's a all too common mistake that we see, as you've just said, Si. Like everyone seems to fall into the trap because it's such a fine balance between training and intake.
yeah.
Um,
And it is a sport that's dominated by, I guess, numbers that are
mm,
related to weight. So
correct. It's a
quite
power to
quite
weight
literally.
sport.
So it is power to weight. There would be similarities there in rowing, I'm sure, where it's power to weight. There's obviously similarities in
Oh,
triathlon as well, in running as well.
I think rowing. I mean, I was lucky in the sense that I got to do the fun one, which was the heavyweight rowing.
Yeah,
So I'm short. I'm like for a rower, I'm 174 centimeters. But when I was there, I topped out at 82 kilos. Like I was just a waddling rectangle of muscle. And yeah, I think the strength was quite literally my strength in rowing. So I was able to overcome the length of my stroke with just the power that I was able to put down.
yeah. So the goal was purely on becoming the strongest you could be, rather than the strongest relative to your weight, I guess.
Oh, correct. Like, and actually, like from a physics perspective, it's more beneficial to have more weight go into the bow because it's propulsion to the finish line.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So then going into cycling, when you started, I know the Tour of Gippsland that you won had some pretty savage climbs in it actually, and you were
Mm.
riding away solo the whole day there. You were also going over to Europe in your first season and second season, and climbing quite well and clearly targeting that. So there's a period I imagine there where there was some pretty rapid weight loss, or not necessarily rapid, but as it turned out, probably unsustainable. Was it a goal for you to try and lose that weight, or was it just something that naturally came with the training itself and maybe being in an environment where it was normal to underfuel your training that way?
No, it was never a focus actually. I think like the reason I was kind of drafted into Green Edge was because yeah, I mean that my agent at the time said they were impressed because I had the same power profile as an under 23 man. Um, so like that was the big draw card for them. And so in my first year there, like yeah, it was just like, and even in my Nick never mentioned weight as a means to get faster. It was always just going to be a product of it. Like there was
Yeah.
a point where I remember there was a point where I said to him like, oh, I had to go to the tailor and get my jeans taken in, and he was like, yeah, that's normal, but it's never a focus on our training. Like as long as you're producing the numbers, I don't.
Yeah.
He's never really concerned.
And at what point then? So was it clearly the performance was going well when you first lost weight, and this is something that I experienced. This is something a lot of people experience, and I think obviously every story is really different, and I think Reds, because it is a multifaceted. I guess, yeah, I don't even know. It's a multifaceted syndrome, I guess.
Mm.
But there's a lot of things going on for some people. They're going to experience different symptoms to others, but the timing of things for a lot of people is you'll be losing the weight. Your performance will be improving as you're losing the weight naturally with training volume. Often there's this sweet spot of 1, 2, 3 months where you're really skinny and still flying and full of energy. Everything looks amazing. You think, yep, this is perfect. Like, this is how it's all
Mm.
supposed to be. Then you see this big crash where, as you sort of touched on earlier, you just get to the point where there's that accumulation. Your body can't keep up with it. You've written checks your body can't cash where there's just too much load. What is that something that happened to you? Did you see that period where it was going really well and then it was just an accumulation and then it was almost like falling off a cliff where you just lost all your energy at once?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think it just started to be like I just wasn't recovering. I think that was a big thing. Like
Yeah.
recovery just went out the window. And then yeah, from there it was just snowball effect, and um, didn't really know how to address it.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's
Mm.
super interesting. And obviously now, even at I guess it's evolved so much in the last few years how important fueling is for the
Mm.
recovery aspect. We've obviously seen that fueling with carbohydrates within the session beneficial to performance within that session. Also, the benefit on recovery has been crazy when
Yeah,
we've looked at
massive.
that. And then so looking at some of the numbers, we've got this crazy situation where you're actually an author of a study. So with Jose Arita, who, if anyone has looked at anything in sports nutrition, they would have come across him plenty of times. He used to live in Melbourne for quite a while. I just remember seeing his name on all the Strava segments maybe 10 years ago now. And
He was his
just,
own guinea pig.
yeah, I had no idea that he was that big in the nutrition world. At the time, I was just riding
Mm.
around all these segments in Melbourne going, oh, yeah, there's this Spanish sounding bloke that's out here going quick up all the hills.
Argentinian,
Yeah, yeah,
Argentinian.
yeah. Well, now I know that now, but at the time I had no idea who this guy was, and then now, yeah, his name's popped up, and I thought, hang on a sec, I know him from all these segments. But so yeah, a few of the authors there clearly ride pretty well. But how did it come that you actually ended up being an author of this study?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Like as you say, he lived in Melbourne. He was a lecturer at La Trobe University, where a friend of mine was working there as well. So she got to know him quite well, and then she connected him with me. As I was just like, because I had, like I said, I came from a rowing background where it was just like I had no idea about nutrition. We actually didn't. We got taught about it when we were rowing, but it wasn't really. It was just like, oh yeah, right. I'll just eat as much as I can all the time. Didn't
Hmm.
really matter what it was. Just and we actually didn't fuel during the sessions. That was actually not a concept that like, we
Super
embraced.
interesting because you'd think practically it would be easier to fuel during a rowing session, right?
Oh yeah, like yeah, 100%. But yeah, it was like bottle, like maybe some Powerade in the bottles, but like you just have water bottles at your feet, and
Yeah.
like maybe you take a caffeine gel if you got a hard session. But
Yeah. Okay.
like we knew about the benefits of caffeine. Like I think at Worlds in 2015, had like 3 coffees and an ibuprofen, and I thought that was really pushing the boundaries of what I should be doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um, so like it wasn't really a known thing. But so then that's why my friend introduced me to Jose to get some just education as to like how a cyclist should be thinking about fueling. Um, yeah, and then the relationship, we just stayed in touch. And then when I went to Europe, we remained in touch. And then he and Leanne Redman, who is she heads up a lab in the US that does analysis for this kind of thing. And so then both of them got access to some funding because it's not cheap.
Yeah.
And Jose, yeah, we were in contact, and I was riding the tour, and he said, "Well, would you want to be our guinea pig?"
Super cool. So the relationship started from you actually coming to Jose for advice on nutrition and fueling within
Yeah,
your own
yeah,
sport, and then I guess you've ended up being able to pay him back with this study into a Tour de France athlete during the
yeah,
Tour de France.
exactly.
Yeah, so if we look at the study, so I'll put a link to it in the show notes, but it's really cool. I wanted to touch on this because I actually heard another podcast, which I'm a big fan of the podcast, the Real Science of Sport podcast. Did
Hmm.
you listen to the episode where they spoke about it?
No, I actually didn't. I didn't know that they spoke about it.
Okay, so yeah, they spoke about you in an episode there. They missed a few. They did a pretty good job of highlighting the key areas. It's pretty cool because to have podcasts now speaking about nutrition in cycling, and then especially
Mm,
in women's cycling. But this is a pretty cool study in that there's not too many in this level of depth into what's actually going on during the race itself. But they missed a few key areas, and then also they were missing a few details of your own writing that was pretty painful to listen to, in terms of even just basic things that I guess it's tricky for scientists to understand, or from reading a study. So they were just astonished by the watts that you were putting out compared to some of the other girls, even watts per kilo wise.
mm.
And I'm just like sitting, I think I was listening to it on a ride, and I was sort of just screaming out on the ride, she's sitting on the front in the wind the whole day, like, because that's your job for the thing. So
Yeah,
these
exactly.
numbers are pretty crazy in like the grant, because they were kept saying, oh, this is crazy that she's putting out even more power than the men's peloton are, and close to the same watts per kilo was as well. And they're just going, oh, this is crazy. All the women are like, because this is an N=1 study as well, I should say. So this was only done on Georgie rather than the whole peloton. So they were just deducing all of these things about, oh, the women are riding so much harder. Maybe they don't
No.
have as good of bikes, or maybe they don't have access to the aero technology or the skills to ride, because otherwise they should be just as fast. But I'm just thinking, no, it's just because Georgie's probably sitting on the front for literally 80% of that stage. And then if
Correct.
it finishes at a mountaintop, she's still having to go ride up that as well. So she's still putting out decent watts there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Good
So
summation. So I should write an email to them.
yeah, it's tricky. And obviously, in a published scientific study, they're not going to be able to put in that much detail in terms of what your job on from the team bus every day was. So
Yeah.
it is tricky to sort of get that full picture. But I will go into some of the numbers because they are pretty crazy, even for someone like me who has been seeing similar numbers in races in the past. But to see this is really cool, and to have it done with the doubly labeled water. So total daily energy expenditure 7,572 kilocalories per day. So that's an average,
Hmm.
which is crazy across the 8-day event. And obviously there's some shorter days in there and some flatter days in there. So yeah, to put that into context for people that don't know, the standard recommended daily intake, I think, for female your age and height would be about 2,000 kilocalories per day. So for non-athletes, that's nearly 4 times the amount. Then if we look at just some of the power numbers, so 342 watts for 5 minutes, 20-minute power of 289 watts. So this is mean maximal power. So that's again the average each day. So obviously there's some days where it's higher, other
Hmm.
days where that'll be a bit lower. The average daily energy intake, and this is where it gets even more crazy, 5,246 kilocal per day. Carbohydrate, 13.7 grams per kilogram per day. Carbohydrate in the stage, 84 grams an hour. So that probably felt like a lot at that time. Now, like, we just
Yeah.
see so many people aiming for way higher than that.
Mm.
But yeah, the big difference there is the estimated daily energy deficit of 2,326 kilocal per day. So first question before I get into the rest of the numbers was, I'm almost sure it wasn't intentional. Were you
Mm.
aware of the fact that you're in that much of a deficit per day?
No, I wasn't. Because I was just looking at the what like the output from my power meter, so the calories expended out of my power meter, and based on how cooked I felt, I'm not surprised now retrospectively looking back at it. But I mean, it was also I just put it down to the fact it was my first Tour de France, and I'm meant to be feeling like this.
Yeah, okay. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's super interesting because I was also doing these calculations because I
Mm.
looked at it and went, okay, that's bonkers. 2,326 kilocalorie per day. So again, people that aren't used to talking calories, like when you've got someone trying to lose weight, you're aiming for around 500 calories per day deficit, and that's what's considered sustainable. Like once you get up to 1,000, you start to think, okay, that's detrimental to health, detrimental to performance, definitely once you get to that range. So you've gone to 2,300, so about 5 times what you'd recommend to someone looking to lose weight. And then at the end of the week, a 2.2 kilogram decrease in body mass. So some of that is going to be fuel stores and the related water that you're holding on to. Obviously, a lot of that's going to also come from fat when you're just in that bigger deficit, and then some from muscle as well, because you cannot lose fat at that rate sustainably. So you're going to lose some muscle, some fuel stores. So yeah, looking at that, no wonder you're feeling pretty rubbish at the end of that stage race.
Yeah, it was I felt it's just yeah, I just felt like I was hit by a bus, honestly. And like, but you're showing up each day and just being like, well, this is the job I got to do today. And being the tour, it's full gas all the time. Like it's only 8 days, so the riders only have X amount of time to make a difference. It's
Yeah.
also the biggest stage, so you got pressures from management to do well. So like yeah, every day is a new day, but every day is stressful. And to be able to you're trying the best that you can to stay on top of your recovery and your fueling, but you just know you just probably can't.
Well, the crazy thing, and this is all from the abstract, so you can all see this when you go straight on there. Georgie's kindly sent me the study, which you can probably try and, if anyone's got any further questions, they can hit me up. But the crazy thing is here, and it says it right in the abstract, despite energy deficiency pre-existing, so there's evidence of this through oligomenorrhea, which is, for those who don't know, absence of a period, massive sign of reds already. And also, as I'm sure you're aware, not too many people might be aware that super common in the women's pro peloton, which is really quite worrying. Super common across all women's sports, but that's a great sign that there might be some issues there. But despite all of those things, your performance was in line of the other World Tour cyclists, and a personal best performance was recorded on the last stage. So that's what I was sort of discussing. Despite all of these, we've got all the data here. We've got the doubly labeled water to really actually know that you're in this much of a deficit each day. You still might finish that race. Now, obviously, you have a lot more knowledge to understand the bigger picture, but someone might be in a similar situation, finish the race, do a PB, and think, "Oh, I'm fine. Like that's all
Yeah,
good."
yeah,
And
yeah,
I lost
exactly.
2 kilos, so it's a bonus. Like,
Oh, 100%. Like it's you just be like you get to the end of the race and you're well, that's good training, that's good condition. I can take that forward.
yeah,
But then like I think I didn't really appreciate the knock-on effect of like that would take on my recovery as well. Like they like you hear the guys talk about how cooked they are after a 3 week tour, and yeah, okay, it's 3 weeks, it's not 8 days, but I would argue that like the intensity of the women's tour is kind of condensed, so it's like 3 weeks of intensity kind of condensed into 8 days. So
yeah, and you do get just that bigger, higher intensity each stage. That's backed up in the numbers as well from comparing I've been able to compare the women's racing to the men's racing. You get a higher intensity factor each day, higher proportion of carbohydrate use each day because of that. So it does become, while the overall energy expenditure for most riders will be lower, in your case, we clearly see that it wasn't just from the circumstances of the race, but there is still going to be a lot of challenges for women to stay on top of that.
Oh, definitely. And I think like with if we can get more studies like this done, we'll just be across different rider types as well. So like I'm a domestique, also time trialist, so I'm not like a mountain domestique.
Yeah.
Um, but if you can get like a GC rider, a sprinter, like a mountain domestique, or like someone going for a stage win rather than the overall GC, like I think it'd give a really nice picture as to how you can approach female sports nutrition.
Yeah. No, well, speaking of studies into this, we do have someone that has been putting a lot of work into this as sponsor for the podcast today. So I want to be upfront and say that while they are sponsoring the podcast, I've been pretty clear with them and with any other sponsor that I've spoken to that I don't want to work with people that I wouldn't use myself. This is a brand that I would use myself. So we're welcoming Sol onto the podcast. Sol Nutrition is a Melbourne-owned and made drink mix for endurance cyclists and athletes. that makes hitting your numbers simple. So it's a maltodextrin to fructose ratio that's optimized to help athletes achieve their goals with confidence and clarity. Backed by personalized data, Sol delivers a complete hydration and fueling solution tailored to your unique performance goals. With a new advanced drink mix just launched and 10% off for listeners, there's never been a better time to try it. So use code MONKFUEL, that's MONKFUEL at checkout, and that's valid through till the end of March. So we will touch on this, Georgie, and it'll come up soon in the rest of the stuff. But you're working with Sol now as well, which is, well, you've been on the list of people that I wanted to get on the podcast for a while. That's how we've ended up teeing it up so quickly. But when you are now, the goal is to be as strong as possible. What changes have you made, I guess, to your fueling compared to where you were in that day? So we look like you were still at 84 grams an hour throughout that whole week. That's probably the hardest, up there with the hardest weeks of riding you've had. But are you doing anything particularly different within the sessions to what you were doing back then?
I think my minimum carbohydrate intake has definitely changed. So if I'm riding any longer than 90 minutes, it's at least 60 grams per hour in the bottles, regardless of intensity, even an easy ride. Because like with the amount of power it takes to put out, like I require that amount of fuel in order to not only fuel the session, but also fuel my recovery after the session. So that way, if I have 3 hours easy, but then I have a really intense session the next day where I need to do quality, I'm going to be recovered enough to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that I remember when I was rowing, I kind of made that switch to like really focus on like making my easier or endurance rows or ergs or whatever, being conscious that like I've got to prepare for the next day. So I think with cycling, switching my nutrition to be like, don't worry about hitting 200 watts if it's an endurance ride. Like if you hit 180, that's fine. But just making sure that I'm fueling and I'm on top of that with at least 60 grams. Probably keep it at 60 for like the long endurance ride, but then really upping it to like 100, 120 for like the really hard ones. Like for instance, I've got a hard bunch ride tomorrow in the morning here in Melbourne. Big hard chop. Like I will likely average close to 300 watts for 20 minutes. During part of that chop, and so that will be 100 to 120.
Yeah. And what kind of product are you using then? So
I'm purely using Sol. I find it super easy to
and
drink
within the Sol range. So the cool thing I've found from like chatting with Cam and also from speaking with. So before even Cam approached me, I obviously spoke to a lot of riders who he has supported locally, which is cool to see a nutrition brand supporting local riders. But the big thing now is like everyone has obviously jumped on the high carb bandwagon. Not everyone, because if you've listened to this podcast, there's a few guys lagging behind, but we're working on them. But the fact that everyone's on it, then the most common like thing is, oh, I can't handle 100 or 120 grams an hour. And then I think the big thing there is then you sort of just have to ask, okay, what are you using to get there? So when you're aiming for 100 to 120, which of the Sol products are you using there?
I'm using their version 1.3 drink mix. So Cam's got a really nice range. He's got like 600 ml bottles, but he's also got 800, and he's talked about getting a 1 liter bottle as well. So you can like I whack 90 grams, 100 grams in each of those 100 ml bottles, and that's me done for. And then I'll carry like a packet of Haribos or like a Ziploc bag with some extra mix if need be. But I think particularly for like the harder chops where similar to a race, like you need to be able to have easy access to fuel. You can't always reach to the back pocket to be able to just like have the easy access of like drinking, and also get the hydration factor as well. Like even when talking to Jose back in the day, he was always like, in the winter, load carbohydrate into your bidons because you don't feel like drinking, but you have to drink because that's your fuel. So you get the hydration and the fuel.
Yeah, and it was something we definitely used in the classics last year is just the super high concentration carb mix because you're not drinking as much. And then the key, which Sol is right on to, and they've done a lot of work into, is getting the ratios right. So the fact that Sol are using the ratios of maltodextrin to fructose. So basically without getting too much into the glucose transporter systems, and the GLUT3 and 4 and all of that stuff, because it'll bore people too much. But you can only absorb a certain amount of glucose per hour. It's said to be around 60 grams for most people. There's going to be outliers that can get up to 80. There's also going to be people that are struggling once they get over 40. The idea is that we add in fructose then to be able to get more of that in. then the whole purpose is like if you've got that in your bottles at the ratio that you know, if you know how much is in your bottles, what ratio it is, you can just drink that. You know you're going to be getting to that limit, not pushing it over the limit to the point where you need to stop on the side of the road because that's never good for performance. But yeah, that's what Solve have been working on to get that ratio right. That's what I've always used in the races where you're doing it, and then like as you said, if you can just get it in your bottles, it's less to think about, and
Yeah,
what you.
it's awesome. And it's
Yeah,
like, yeah, you just whack it on the kitchen scales, chuck 90 grams, and that's 90 grams of carbohydrate. Like the whole concept of, I think what Cam's doing is, I think I said to you before offline, is like really democratizing nutrition
yeah,
in this way, like making it really simple. Not only simple to understand, but simple to for your gut to digest as well. Like I remember I went to a training camp with my old teammate Anes and Esteban over in like the Galicia on the other side of Spain to where I live usually in Girona, and she introduced me to the concept of like mixing my own malto and fructose powder. Um,
yeah. And I know so many people have been on this, and then yeah, the fact now that it's done for you is so much easier.
yeah, with your own personalized fueling plan as well.
Yeah,
Comes on that comes on your, like, you get your own personalized tub. So you like, yeah, you literally send him your FTP and he provides you with, based on your normalized power, what you should be fueling each hour based on the intensity.
yeah, that is super cool. That when I heard that that was going on, it genuinely was like, okay, we've hit the future. That's where we're
Yep,
living now. It's all
100%.
sorted. But
Yeah.
all right, we'll get into our usual run of questions. So when you are on the, I'm going to guess that this first question is going to be when you're smashing the higher carb stuff. But what would be your favorite training session?
I am a sucker for like a long, like tempo or threshold interval,
Okay.
like repeated. I love like a 40 minuter, like 3 by 40 minutes, like under overs. So
Oh,
like,
I don't know. That's a first that we've had 40 minutes in the favorite session bucket.
yeah, I used to do when I was in Spain. We had like this loop for TTs, and Nick would give these this sessions to be like 3 by 40 minutes, and it's like this outdoor, like always right hand turn, so you don't like get roundabouts, so you don't have to stop, and it's just like largely flat, and it's so it was just, yeah, 2.5 hours, 3 hours out there just doing like 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes over unders,
Yeah. Okay.
and yeah, you just get into a really nice flow state. It's good.
Nice. And then what would be your least favorite session?
Probably the session I got on Thursday this week, which is like 40 seconds, really, really, really hard, 3 minutes easy, by like
Yeah.
four, by three. Nick literally put in my pre-training notes like, "You're not gonna like this."
Okay.
So
No, I have seen. Yeah, it's not something I prescribe that much or do that much, but I have seen it used quite a bit. Those kind of, yeah. It's. Are you doing them to a number or it's just all out?
it's to a number. So this is
Yeah.
like VO2.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just kind of that awkward thing where it's like it's not a 40-20 or a 1-to-1 ratio of work to
Mm,
rest. So you're expected to be able to go really hard, but then the recovery is not quite enough. So you never really feel that amazing by the time you get to the next effort. And then progressively, once you stack those up by the last one, you're like, oh, hang on a
yeah.
sec, I can't actually do this.
Yeah. I think is this what you would call lactate shuffling? I don't know.
No, the lactate shuttling tends to be more less time off. So
Hmm.
then you having to use that lactate in the next interval. Um, it's kind of tricky and it's coming more and I've spoken to Nick about it a bit on the podcast, Steve and Lane as well. They're both making use of these kind of sessions more. I'm seeing other people use them more. I think they're good because it is actually what you see a bit of in a race in terms of that really hard effort and then proper recovery and then that really hard effort again.
Definitely.
Um, but yeah, as you said, I don't find them that enjoyable either. So try and
I
avoid
mean,
those.
you're a breakaway artist. You'll have to get off the front and then just sit at
Yeah,
that uncomfortable part for
I
a
can
long
just do
time.
that by going to a club crit and then doing enough intervals there. Um, all right, favorite training loop.
Favorite training loop? Oh, that's a good one. I love some of the training loops in Adelaide.
Okay.
So, out like basket ranges that way.
Yep.
But here in Melbourne, you can get some really beautiful ones out to the Dandenongs. The commute there is pretty shit, but once you're out there, like you're in amongst these trees that are thousands of years old. And yeah, it's pretty Jurassic out there, and you can
Yeah,
kind
it's
of lose
cool.
yourself a bit. Like the Big Mac loop is always a good one.
All right. When you do have efforts in a ride, are you someone that gets them done at the start, or do you leave them to the end, or do you try and spread them out?
Depends on the effort. Usually if it's just I've got to like I'm going out to train functionally. Like I'll do 30 to 40 minute warm up, get the efforts done, and then top up at the end. I like the having an hour and a half at the end of the ride to just kind of chill and enjoy. Now that the work's done.
Yep. Nice. And
Yeah.
then when you get your training plan, when Nick's got it in Training Peaks, are you someone that sticks to it religiously, or do you change it up, or halfway through a session do you call him and ask what to do if it's not going too well? What's your go-to there?
I think now I'm like previously I was pretty like I just did it. Like occasionally I'd text him and be like, these don't feel great today. Can I adjust?
Yeah.
But now I think I've got a bit more of a flexible attitude when it comes to training. Like as long as I get the quality done, I'm pretty flexible with if I go over or under the total time. But
Mm-hmm.
I prioritize getting the quality done.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then when you are training, are you solo or in a group? You already said you have a good bunchy, but when you've got the efforts, is that when you always go by yourself, or do you still try and tee up a ride with someone?
I would love to tee up a ride with people. I'm getting better at that. Trying to get faster so that way my friends are pretty fast. It's one of the shitty things about having fast friends as cyclists. So you need to, yeah, I'm getting faster now. So I think I'm at the stage now where I can do efforts with friends. So
Yep.
that's usually take a few of my weekend warriors out and they sit on my wheel or we do the efforts together and that's their structure for the week.
Mm-hmm.
But if I've got like TT efforts or like I just have to get them done because I got something on that day. I'll just do them solo. Yeah.
Yep. And then this is probably more relevant to Melbourne than when you're overseas, but when
Mm.
it's pissing rain outside, do you jump on the trainer or do you just go out and get it done in the rain?
I'm a turbo.
Ah, yeah.
I'm on the turbo. Melbourne in COVID, I would spend hours. So I'm not afraid. Plus, when I went to university in the States, where like the lake would freeze for 3 months of the year, so like for 4 years straight, I would for a quarter of the year I'd just be stay on a stationary ergo like for
Yeah,
hours.
and there's no Zwift on rowing ergos, is there?
None, none.
Were
You
you
just
were you watching movies or just staring at the numbers?
I was just watching myself self in the mirror,
Ah,
like with this big mirror. So I just like watching myself in a lot of pain, watching my teammates in a lot of pain. But we had this wicked speaker system. I think the head coach, I reckon she's partly deaf because we play music pretty loud. Like it's this massive room with like 10 speakers.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm not jealous of that setup. Even doesn't would had take some very good music to make me
It
actually enjoy that
smells
scenario.
quite delightful, like in the depths of
Yeah,
winter when like it's dark outside. It's like -10, so like the windows are all fogged up.
yeah.
Like it's
No,
just steaming.
doesn't sound too great. When you are on a stop, are you when you are on a ride? Sorry, are you stops or no stops?
Oh, stops. I think you got to enjoy it.
Yeah,
I'm trying to condition some of my friends to be like, a stop is all right, cafe, like, servo, but in the latter half of the ride though. Like I'm
yeah.
not
Well, I was
someone
going
who
to
like
say we did catch up for coffee the other day. Well, that was my breakfast, so that was for me 5 minutes into the ride, which is probably a little bit not quite didn't
yeah.
quite get into the latter half of the ride, but yeah, I'm team stops for sure with you as well.
Yeah.
All right, favorite training food. We touched on the soul stuff, which I'm sure is up there in terms
Mhm.
of what's actually practical. You got Haribo's in the back pocket sometimes. Is there anything else that you go to?
Well, now that I'm back in Australia, it's Natural Confectionery
Okay.
Company,
Yeah, yeah.
lollies. And then pre-ride, if I've got an intense one, I'm really getting into like the rice creams.
What are they?
They're like the canned rice you can
Ah,
get, the
yeah,
rice
yeah, yeah.
puddings.
I
Yeah.
that I used to be on that way back in the day. Like, show up to a Victorian Road Series. It was. I thought they were the biggest races in the world back then, and
They
yeah,
are.
would have been seven. Yeah, they are 17 or 18 years old. Just show up, crack the top off of cream rice, and just get into that before the start.
Yeah, 80 grams of carbs. You're
Yeah,
done.
yeah, that's pretty practical. It's good as well. What about straight after the ride when you get in the door? What's your go-to?
Have some protein. Usually like a Rockaby, one of those Rockaby
Uh,
smoothies. I think they're so
I got
good.
to say this. It's Rokeby. Like I know
Rokeby.
people are saying Rockaby or Rokaby. I live like 5K. I can see Rokeby from here. It is Rokeby. Even the company has said Rokeby, I think. And they've supported me in the past. They're they're fine, but it's pronounced Rokeby for anyone listening.
Rokeby. Okay, Rokeby. I will change my tune. Look, hey, I think it was John Maynard Keynes who said, like, if someone presents facts that are contrary to my opinion, I change my opinion.
Yeah,
So I'm changing my opinion.
yeah,
Rokeby.
yeah. Rokeby is the actual name of the town that the brand is named after. But
Okay, well, I'll
no,
crush one of them.
yeah, they're good as well. The This is going to be an interesting question, which usually I haven't got touched on it by this point. By this point, we've already touched on it for about half an hour. But low carb or always well fueled for your training?
Fuck, always well fueled. It's
Did at any point were you trying low carb stuff?
um yeah, there were points in my training that I
Do
was
you
low
think that may
calorie.
have contributed to you getting reds, or do you think you probably would have got it anyway just from constantly being in that energy
I
deficit
think
state?
I think there's very good research now to support that having a good carbohydrate load for a female athlete prevents a lot of endocrine issues. Yeah, I think
Yeah, and not
yeah,
just in women, in men it's similar. So I
yeah,
had endocrine issues myself. Yeah, when talking through like how people have similar stories, same
yeah,
kind of thing. Lost a lot of weight, not necessarily intentionally, um, but yeah, there's some low carb stuff involved in that. Some fasting for long
mm,
periods, just because yeah, at the time it was the cool thing to do when I thought it was good, and then yeah, as it turned out, if I had have been actually just smashing down carbs the whole time, yeah, I might not have lost the weight as quickly, but I probably would have been a hell of a lot stronger, and then not had all the endocrine issues for the following year after that.
yeah, definitely. So I think definitely team high carb, and yeah, I think it's starting to change in the world tour as well. Like you ride with like riders from DSM, for instance, like they're same as me, minimum 60 grams an hour.
Yeah, I've noticed that for sure, and
Yeah.
it helps everyone at the world tour levels getting given nutrition products, but like now it's even changed to like it's not pack a muesli bar, it's like pack some proper energy chews and put drink mix in your bottles
Yeah,
for like anything over like an hour recovery ride. Even in an
definitely.
hour recovery ride, someone's bringing like a 30 gram something something or stopping in the cafe
Mm,
at some point. But yeah, now it's just like everyone drink mix in the bottles every day because it's just practical and makes sense if you actually want to ride fast.
definitely. Like it's I've definitely noticed like I'm not like I used to kind of get home from rides and just, be a bit cross-eyed, but now it's like in the last 30 minutes and yeah, I distinctly like now look at that and be like that wasn't good.
Yeah,
Just
and that's the biggest thing when I've spoken to athletes in the
mm,
past is, and guests on the podcast have said it, the amount of rides, if you, like so many guys at the end of their career go, if I could take back all of those rides where I felt fried and couldn't get the efforts done, or in the second half of the ride was just crawling home and
mm,
just looked at how many of those was just not feeling well enough, it would just be a crazy amount. And like if they look back at all the sessions they've missed out on over the years because they couldn't get them done just purely because they weren't fueled enough. So even today, like I had a 5 hour endurance ride. Back
mm,
in the day, it would have just been okay, like eat as little as possible. This is a great
mm,
way to just like lose a bit of weight, get fat adapted, whatever. But then, yeah, as you said, recovering for the next days, being able to do this podcast now, hopefully I'm still making sense. Like for
yeah,
sure in the past, yeah, I used to just do rides like that, not particularly hard, no efforts or anything, and then just get
mm,
home and not be able to do anything the rest of the day. Like literally be glued to the couch, have to have two naps in the afternoon just because at the time you just think, oh, this is a normal part of training. It's
mm,
cool. I'm cooked. Like that's what it's supposed to be like, as you touched on. But yeah, if you're actually fueling the session well, then it
mm.
doesn't have to be like that. There is a better option.
There's always a better option, and I think yeah, it's a good realization. I think it's frustrating when you look back at it though, and you're like
Yeah.
because it's such a simple thing to fix.
Yeah, and it's so frustrating in the sense of like everyone makes the mistake still.
Yeah,
um,
it does.
like I guess yeah, in your instance, it's probably still yeah. There was enough anecdotal research. I think now in the past few years, it's just gone crazy. Studies like
Mm,
your own one, but also a lot of bigger cohort studies. But I'd just love people to be able to listen to this podcast. The fact that you're on here, and also that we'll use Cell to help promote it to try and
yeah,
stop some people making these mistakes. Um,
definitely. Yeah, for sure.
because yeah, people still
Mm,
continually do it, but if you can just avoid that, you're going to be so much stronger, healthier, and riding your bike faster, which everyone wants to
yeah,
do.
happier too.
Yeah, yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Right, any cross training in your training program?
I've got a bit of an iffy back at the moment, but usually I get in the gym. So when I was rowing, that was, yeah, 3 times a week, every week, for 13 years. So I've got a big history of weightlifting, and very much enjoy it. So looking to get back in the weight room, but I think strength training, for a cyclist is pretty key.
Yep. Have you got into any running?
Ah,
Or
no, I tried, but I think it's the devil's work, quite frankly.
yeah, yeah. I was gonna say it's interesting.
Yeah.
Did you obviously when you're diagnosed with Reds one, it's a tough one because you can never really be diagnosed with Reds. There's just a lot of symptoms that are sort of mixed in together that are obviously not
Mm.
beneficial and then attributed to that. But did you have any issues with bone density?
No, but from the 13 years of weightlifting and
Yeah, that's what I was going
rowing.
to say
Yeah,
because
yeah,
that's a massive one because
yeah.
rowing for sure isn't weight bearing. Like yeah, there's a lot of strength work in it, and you're
Mm.
putting a lot of force through joints more so than you would be on the bike. But yeah, weightlifting, there's plenty of research there to show that it's really good for bone density. A lot of people
Yeah.
have got into running for that. Cyclists have got into running to help their bone
Mm.
density because cyclists all have chronically low bone density.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that gym work probably has saved you there then.
Yeah, it was I've loved it. I think I think it's just also helps you being functional for life as well.
Definitely. Yeah.
After the age of 30, I think we start to degrade. So
Yeah. Yeah.
on the
Women,
downward
women
slope.
especially. So yeah, if you
Yeah.
can keep that routine up, it makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I think from again, endocrine perspective, it's really beneficial as
Yeah,
well.
for sure.
There's a lot of upsides. It's not just the abs and the biceps, but there's a lot of other upsides to it.
Yeah. All right, we'll get into the rapid fire round before we finish things off.
Great.
So, rapid fire, would you rather? Which one of these would you prefer? So, first up, aero or lightweight?
Aero,
Disc or rim brake?
always disc,
Tubeless or clincher?
tubeless,
Saddlebag or handlebar bag?
saddlebag,
Socks over or under leg warmers?
over.
Over. Oh, you're the first one
Yeah,
to go over. Gloves or no gloves?
like race gloves.
Yeah, training or racing. The most common is no in training, yes in racing. You in that camp?
Yep, I'm in that camp. Yeah.
Yep. Heat or altitude training?
Uh, both.
Both. Okay.
Yeah.
Town sign sprints or QOM hunting?
Town signs.
Oh, nice. That's
Yeah.
surprising. I thought you'd love picking off QOM as well.
There is nothing better than hitting the ego of a middle-aged man who thinks that they got you in a town sign sprint.
Yeah, nice. Is that your coach you're referring
Yeah.
to? Early morning or pro hours?
uh, I think before I went to Europe, I'd say early morning, but now I'm gonna have to say pro hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
Complete day off or Rico spin?
Um, I think when you feel under the weather and iffy, take the day off, like I did yesterday. But if you feel fine and don't mind kidding up, go for a 45 hour spin. It could be good for the soul. No headphones, just think.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's worrying. Too much head noise with that. Pasta or rice?
Rice,
Sweet or savoury?
savory.
Half wheeler. Would you rather ride with a half wheeler or a wheel sucker?
Because I'm a half wheeler, so I'm gonna have to say wheel sucker.
Yeah, okay. I thought you'd like riding with, like getting in the half wheel game there.
No, because then we end up just killing each other. It's
Yeah,
better
okay.
than the one half wheeler in the
Yeah,
bench.
but prefer they just sit on.
Yeah.
Squeaky disc brake or creaky bottom bracket?
Creaky bottom bracket.
And would you prefer complete hunger flat or severe dehydration?
Oh man, both are awful.
Yeah, which one? You got to pick one.
Um, Go complete hunger flat.
Yeah, okay. Well, if you've got your soul on you, you should be fine in
I
theory.
won't hunger flat. Cam, I promise I won't.
Yeah. Just gonna have to make sure you take plenty in your back pocket as well for the endurance days.
Exactly.
Yep. All right, very last question. Best piece of advice.
Um, you can do anything, but you can't do everything.
Okay. And is that referring to yourself, or like, do you feel like you've been doing that at certain times, trying to
I
do
think
everything?
now, I mean, I caught up with Grace Brown actually, and we're talking about this yesterday. I feel like now that I've stepped away from the world tour and kind of stepped away from being like a pro athlete in the technical term, I feel like I have to always be doing something and
Hmm.
I always have to be moving forward. But I need to be quite strategic as to how I spend my time because it
Yep.
is not infinite. Then, like, if you just let that anxiety rule the roost when it comes to things like your calendar, all of a sudden you've got no time for anything because you're
Yep.
trying to do everything.
Yep. Yeah, and that makes sense. I guess a lot of people that are riding, regardless of their status, whether they're trying to make it as a pro, whether they are a pro, or whether
Mm,
they're the businessman or woman trying to fit it in, that advice is very poignant because I have a lot of people that I work with in a coaching sense
mm,
that, yeah, have limited time, and then it's okay, like, let's focus on this riding goal, but at the same time, if it's going to take away from your family, from
mm.
your business, from other things that may sit higher on that hierarchy, then you really have to, as you said, yeah, be strategic about how you set those goals and where you try to devote that energy.
I think my dad always says it's like there are three things you can do well in life, like it can be like training, social, family, or like work, training, family, like once it exceeds three, then things start to, yeah, something's got to give.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it, and
Mm.
obviously, certain people try and push that as far as they can, but yeah, you
Yeah.
might get, yeah, you whichever way you look at it, you're going to spread yourself pretty thin eventually. So
Oh,
to
exactly.
work on
Just
those,
thin as Vegemite.
yeah, so to work on those things that you really want to focus on, get the
Mm.
most out of yourself in those areas. I think that's great advice. All right, well, we will wrap it up there. Thanks very much to Georgie for coming on. Thanks very much to Soul Nutrition for sponsoring this episode. Check them out again. The code is MONKFUEL, MONKFUEL. Use that at checkout on the Soul site when you're stocking up for your next rides. And yeah, best of luck, Georgie, for the upcoming goals. Let's check in when you hit your 350 watt threshold.
I'll finally be able to ride with you.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think you'll be able to ride with me then because you'll be waiting too much if you're riding around at 350 watts all day. I don't like to train that hard unless it's a race. If I've got a number, if I've got a number on, then we'll be fine.
All right. All right.
Yep. Cool. Thanks very much for coming on. Thanks everyone for listening. Make sure you subscribe and watch the next one. Cheers.